Okay, well, this is gonna be kind of tough just because we don't have anything formally prepared because we didn't know about it until Thursday at 6 o'clock. And really, we need a little bit more information to know what she's wanting. So I'll read the email though from Ms. Sarah. What she wanted to talk about was the decision to stop giving out homework and implementation date. And so we haven't stopped giving out homework, so I'm not for sure what her experience is or what concerns are being communicated to her. That's a teacher-based decision,
Right.
and so we have teachers who probably give out too much homework and some teachers who give out no homework. But I think we have to rely on our teachers that that's their decision and give them that autonomy that they know their kids. So we don't have a formal policy on homework. If I had to guess, I would assume at least half of our teachers or more probably do homework, give homework to kids.
I could speak to the elementary. So we've never discussed not giving homework, but I know a few years ago, it was discussed with principals and staff about how we needed to make sure that the homework that we were sending home was something that the child had learned, that it wasn't new, that we weren't giving homework just to give homework, that it needed to be meaningful. And so that is the only thing I can think of at the elementary level, but we have never been told not to give homework. We have just been told that it needed to be meaningful and it could not be something new, that they had to have already learned the skill.
And so there is no implementation date, because that's not any kind of policy or in our handbook or anything like that.
Well, I can hear a child telling the parent, oh no, we don't do homework anymore.
Well, my stepson says that as well, but then his grades say differently sometimes.
Right.
You know, so,
I would say at the middle level, it's really just if they haven't completed the learning that they've assigned. It's
Right.
not like, I want you, in the olden day, you might have gotten, in my day, you might have sent home 25 math problems that was strictly homework. But this is just really the extension of their learning, and as if they haven't completed that, probably at middle and high more than anything.
Yeah, what's class time work and you get time
Right.
in class to
There's-
finish it all, and if you don't, that's what.
And you take it home.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's not very,
that's what.
yeah.
I think a lot of times in our classroom too, the teacher presents the lesson of new information, they do some guided practice, and then they'll have some independent practice at home. They may give 5 problems or something like that, then they bring it back in and they go over that to give the kid an opportunity to do that task independently. So,
Yeah, that was, I'd never heard that there
Okay.
was a.
I have heard on the flip side that some teachers are giving out too much homework, but again, I think when we start getting in the weeds of telling teachers, you can't give this much or you can't give that much, it could be frustrating on their part because we have to trust them as being the instructor for their kids and knowing their kids well.
And how
knowing
much
what
time
they
during
need.
the day that student has to accomplish the work?
Sometimes,
So
Yes.
it's on the students many
Uh-huh.
times to not use their time wisely.
yep.
And sometimes if a student is struggling, they may have more to do because they
Right.
weren't able to get it finished. And so,
I would be curious to know what specific concerns came to her, so I'll just shoot her an email and ask, and maybe we can just work that out individually. The other part of her question was how the lack of homework has affected test scores. And so again, we do have lots of teachers giving out homework. I do think our teachers are mindful in some classes where if they have a particular group of students who they know won't get it done at home, or if it's frustrating, then they may use class time to go over that with them.
Sure.
But again, I think we have to trust our teachers that they know what's appropriate for their group of kids.
Well, it's kind of late in the year even to be wondering about that unless they're recognizing the grade the child's receiving as low and maybe it's the result of no homework. So,
The other thing I would add too is we have Closing the Gap, so a lot of our teachers are doing tutoring after school, and so a lot of our elementaries have busing. I think even our middle level has.
This one, we do have this.
Okay, has busing. So then kids may go home and not have homework because they're staying after school. to do that with the teacher and get one-on-one help. Anything, Bethany, to
Yeah,
add?
we don't give a ton of homework at the elementary. I mean, when you look at Hattie's work, it doesn't support the use of homework as improving achievement. It actually says it's kind of a moot point. And so we do a lot of encouraging parents to read. We'll do some practicing of basic math, but it's usually things the student can do independently at home with a sibling or a parent. Because we don't get a lot of homework returned at the elementary level, and sometimes we don't have a lot of parent involvement, and so we just want to make sure that we're utilizing the kids' time effectively and that we're going to increase achievement. So we do send home some homework, especially if they didn't get something done in class, but the regular use of a lot of homework, it's not highly practiced at the elementary. It's very strategic on what the kid needs to make progress.
And I would just add, if there's parents out there that want homework from their child's teacher, all they have to do is email them, and I'm sure our staff would be more than happy to send home some practice materials at home for home.
Yeah, because sometimes that just gives the parent a clue of what's happening in the classroom.
Sure.
To see some kind of paperwork. But in the classes I sub in, there's always a folder, you know, take home, bring back, you know, sometimes it comes back, sometimes it doesn't, but there's always something to sign where the parent, you know, is involved. Sign here if you've seen it or whatever, and I know it gets lost in translation with the elementary. But, you know, there are ways to track it. For a parent who really wants to see it, I don't see what keeps them from contacting the teacher.
They can. So, Kim, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but this next one, academic achievement improvement or lack of improvement of students sent to alternative schools. So again, I was planning on asking Asara to elaborate on that one a little bit so that we could have a discussion.
Read that to me again.
It says the academic achievement improvement or lack of improvement of students sent to alternative school.
Okay, she,
So I don't know if she's just wanting to know the overall success of our students who are currently at alternative school. I'm not for sure what she's wanting, or if she's thinking future planning, since we're kind of in a transformation state right now.
is she thinking maybe that, is the alternative school worth it? Does it do the job to help improve the academic side of the student, or does it, you know, help behavior?
And right now, it's not really a school for behaviors. It's primarily serving kids who are academically behind. So students who, you may have a junior with 4 credits. That's typically who is at Webster right now.
That's way behind.
It is, but they have the Missouri Options program out there. So, Blair, do you want to speak to this one?
Well, it's hard to measure the lack of, if that's what we're talking about, current practice, because they're in a different track instead of credit bearing, they're going for the Missouri option track. So I don't know that we could say there's a lack of improvement or either or at this point.
Because it's a different avenue.
It's a different avenue than what we've done in the past. I would venture to guess, I'm just reading into that, but I think it's probably future of, is an alternative setting going to support our academic lens, is what I'm thinking that.
To
is
perhaps
that-
return the child
is,
into.
right, is that, I bet, are we doing what's right academically by placing a student in an alternative setting, is I think probably what she's
That may-
gearing
that's-
towards, but I could be totally wrong. Because she's been part of our graduate academy conversation, so she would be aware of where we are on that track right now.
I have a question about our virtual learning.
Sure.
I have a friend whose children are virtual learners. And she was told that in order to take AP classes, you had to be on site. They could not be done virtually. So would you help me understand that?
Yeah, I can. So, this year, this could be a long story here, get ready, no.
That's okay, we have.
We have time, no. So, this year, due to our numbers, so if I'm a virtual student, so we offered all of the coursework, and our AP courses might have had 2 or 3 kids enrolled in those courses, okay? So if we're at a school site, and which I'll give the whole scenario. If I'm at a school site and we have 2 or 3 kids in a course, we're either going to dual seat those, meaning that teacher's gonna teach AP, ELA 12, and ELA 12 at the same time. Does that make sense? Like in one section. This year we have teachers that are teaching, I'm trying to think how, our ELA teacher, I think she's teaching 11 or 12 different courses. So she's teaching she's teaching AP 12, ELA 12, AP, all the way, dual credit, the whole gamut,
Right.
all the way down. And so at the beginning, when we don't have a lot of staffing across the, to make sure we're staffed both virtual and in person, we were eliminating some of those courses because we would in a high school. If we don't have
Right.
enough kids, we don't offer the course, which is bothersome, but it's very real too. And so this year, we decided that we weren't going to at the beginning, and it was in the middle of a transition, you have to remember that. So we weren't going to offer some of those special courses because we didn't have enough kids enrolled in them. And the VA teacher said, no, we want to do that. We want to take on that load. The coursework is made, we want to take that on. But in prior years, they were paid for some overload. So the more courses you taught, you were given an overload payment. Well, that's pretty costly when you have 2 kids and then we're paying $2,500. So you have to, in order to break even, it's almost, we have to, I think it was 8 to 10 kids, because we have other, like the launch opportunity. And so they said, we want to do it. And I said, well, we have to have a threshold before we pay an overload. And they said 180 kids. So if we're in a building, you teach 6 or 7 with 30 in a seat, let's say, which they're on not all that high. That's 180 kids. So they were on board for that this year. We're not going to be able to do that for next year. Due to staffing, also due to not offering if we don't have enough kids, and we really, to be very frank, we got into a little bit because of the overloads. People expected the overloads if they paid if they taught the courses instead of the dual seated. So they do have, but hear me this, they can do a blended approach. If they want to come on site for the AP coursework, they can come in and do the AP blended and have the other virtual courses if they choose. Also, any student, not that we want them to, but any student can go through a MOCAP option, and then they can enroll through MOCAP, and they aren't part of us anymore as far as our district. They won't graduate from us, but they would graduate from a MOCAP provider.
Yeah, because I think her concern was, that was the reason they were doing virtual, is because the child was more successful out of the school and doing very well with the virtual academy. So to be told that you gotta be on site was a little unsettling
For the one class?
for the
AP
dual
class.
classes or the AP classes, because the child is just excelling through the virtual. And she's just concerned about putting them back into a classroom where he wasn't very successful.
Does Launch offer the AP? Or so they're,
Launch.
Yeah, so I would encourage you to tell that parent if she could reach out to the high school principal or to one of us, and we can walk her through that individual situation. We want to do what's,
I've done that part.
okay.
That's the easy part, because I know very little compared to what you know. So I'll remind her to do that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because there's, 2 of these options didn't even come to my mind. But MOCAP would be a good alternative, or even the launch program. for this child.
If it's something to where they still have some of our courses through Virtual Academy and they're only taking a few of the courses through Launch, then they would still be a St. Joseph School District student,
Okay.
so,
Yes, because I know she wants them to graduate.
okay, from
With-
us,
Yes,
Sure.
with you.
yeah. So we work with folks one-on-one
Okay.
to do what's best for that kid. Does that all make sense with the virtual overload courses? Because that's been kind of a pickle this year, to be really honest with you.
But it's gotta be confusing, even to the instructors, to know balancing act.
Sure. The convenience side of it is that the courses are prepared all online. And so
Oh, that's nice.
it's not as cumbersome as an in-person teacher, in my opinion, because most of the lessons are all created. So the tricky part is when you have a class of 5 kids and paying that $2,500, then you may have another class of 4 kids paying that $2,500. It does add up. So,
It would be expensive
Yeah,
for the
it's going
district.
to be
right.
fiscally responsible.
Both of us are
Yeah.
pretty frugal people, but also, yeah, we want to be responsible of taxpayers' dollars.
Oh, that
Any
helped
other-
a lot.
Good.
And
Good.
I will refer her again to you
Yeah.
guys.
We're
Because you can
approaching
explain
people
those
too.
other things to her,
Mhm.
the other availabilities.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other open items?
So on the alternative school, what discussions, I know last time we mentioned we would transition them maybe to the buildings so that we could capture the graduation rate. So that is still part of
Yes, I think you're
transition?
speaking about the Missouri Options kids.
Well, when they're short credit, shy credit, and they're in Webster,
Yes.
and they're catching up. So it sounds like, and I could be wrong, maybe Kendra tracks that data, but if Ezra is asking how successful are we, it would seem that that data is outside of our normal district. And that's why we're thinking of transitioning to buildings, yes?
Just wondering on the Missouri options.
I'm not sure. The challenge that we have though is behaviors in some of our buildings and that really derail learning in the classroom. And so we have to respond to that with our teachers. So that's why the shift. And then the students at Webster that are Missouri Options kids, we believe that they would be better served in their home buildings because if these kids are academically behind, but really don't exhibit behaviors, why wouldn't we have them in their home building where they have friends and a connection with a staff member? And so the plan is to have Missouri Options available at our 3 high schools. To measure success rate, I suppose you could look at how many have passed the Missouri Options test. And I think Leah sent us that data for quarter 1, quarter 2, and quarter 3, if you'd like me to share that.
That might be what she's asking for.
Sure.
Like how, for me, the alternative, Webster used to be more like behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So when we started talking alternative last meeting, I was like, wow, we've really like mixed it. And so going forward, as we transition, if we bring the academic back to buildings, and Webster is clearly for disruptive behavior issues, which I think years ago was more that way.
It was.
Yeah.
I worked at Colgan Center back when that was open.
Yes.
And there was lots of different programs for all different levels.
Yes.
we want it to be more of an academic focus with those kids, and so really providing the supports academically, behaviorally, to help those kids be successful. After touring Independence, small class size was apparent. They had one teacher and one para for 10 kids. And I think that was extremely beneficial for those kids there.
The other thing was their sub, they didn't really need, their para was sub certified, so that was really helpful. That if the teacher was gonna be absent, then the sub, could
Yeah.
step in
Yeah.
as the para.
Yeah. There was a period of time where there were no kids at alternative school. They weren't accepting kids for a little while. But then when we started with the Aspire program, that was mainly for kids academically behind. And so, which has left behaviors in some of our buildings, and so that's why the change.
Yeah, it's increasing.
And it's tough. I mean, we've all, our team is all in buildings quite often, and we see it where you can have one or two kids really doing the learning for everyone else, which isn't fair to those other kids. So,
We are, working on the shift back. Those students that will go to the alternative setting will still work on credits, towards credits. And we met with a gentleman on Friday just to try to capture them in a different light of a different instructional practices. So a lot of times the behavior is a direct result that they're not a traditional sit in a chair kind of student. And so we're gonna really work towards different instructional strategies to support the type of learning, more of a hands-on approach. And some opportunities there.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will shift a little bit, because our real goal is to transition them back to their home base eventually, is what we would love to do. We are going to, though, the current students that are in Graduate Academy, there's some juniors there, they're gonna have the opportunity to stay at Webster with, we have a Missouri Options staff over there to help, so instead of pushing them back into a building if they've been out for a couple years, some might want to, some might not, but, and they also can be part of the activities at their home schools, which I think will be nice for some of them. And if they want to be in any of the coursework, they would have time in their day. They have to be a full-time student, but it can look a little bit different.
So that would just be during transition?
Yeah, just this one time, yeah. No, we will though, our kids, if we have students that arrive at Webster due to behaviors that are really credit deficient, we'll have a Missouri Options route there as
Sure.
well, but that would be a little probably.
But more intense,
Yeah.
differentiated instruction.
Yes, yeah. And I shouldn't speculate, but if they're a senior coming in to an alternative setting, I shouldn't say that, but the odds are probably pretty great that they might be credit deficient if they're coming in at 11th or 12th now for behavioral. But that could be wrong too, because you can have lots of credits and be a great student and still not make good choices. Doesn't happen very often, but it's real. It does happen. It does. So.
And sometimes the behavior results in them not understanding what they're
Yes.
supposed to be learning.
Yes, yes.
And they'd rather be
Yeah.
thought of as
Yes.
ornery instead of stupid.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
So-
yeah. I'm with you.
Sometimes pulling them out just
Can go either way.
does what they need.
Yeah. So,
And DLO, I was reviewing our policies on curriculum, and I found where there's a Missouri state statute on incorporating phonics in K through 5.
Yes, yes.
And you were saying that you found out we didn't use it, but we were going to start. So I was just curious if I could get an update.
That, was it me or was it Bethany? I'm
I
trying to remember which
don't
conversation.
know, but we do have phonics in our curriculum. It is written in
It's
our
in there,
curriculum and we
yes.
do teach phonics.
Now, at the
So-
Early Learning Center, I don't know if that was part of the conversation, we just did some professional development with phonics.
Okay,
And
good.
maybe that was what the conversation was about, I can't remember exactly. To where they just incorporated, but the teachers had some specific training because it wasn't something they had had professional development on in the past.
Okay.
So,
But phonics is in our curriculum.
Yeah, it is in the
I
curriculum.
know it's in curriculum, I'm just wanting to make sure it's in instruction.
Yeah.
Well, our teachers teach our curriculum, that's our expectation. And our principals supervise them on that, through the teacher evaluation process, so it is all there. I'm not saying, I mean, we always are providing them with good professional development, we're always trying to, build better teachers, but it is there, we are teaching on it.
The resources are there,
The curriculum is there, we don't have a reading resource, we teach the standard.
We arm our teachers in tools and strategies to make them successful in small group instruction with phonics instruction. So at the K-5, like Desi right now currently is leading up an initiative in letters, which is a product of Lexia and Voyage. We have teachers leading that learning right now or going through that learning. And in fact, on our instructional coach team, we are empowering one of our instructional coaches to go through and be a trainer for our district. And that way we have an in-house trainer, not an outside person to lead us.
Okay, good. So we're developing.
Here's what's happened, we've had so many buildings doing whatever reading instruction at the elementary level they want. So we've had, you could say, let's do really great reading, Pathways, Haggerty, Orton Gillingham, UFly, they're all doing that. What we're trying to do is bring it back to the center and make it more consistent from a district standpoint, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different looks at data right now to see which building is showing the impact, a positive impact, and which direction that we need to go as a district. We have a K-12 group that met in the summer in June, and then we connected back in January, and I showed them some data, and then we talked through that process. And now I'm meeting with individual reading intervention teachers. For example, I'm meeting with Susan Stiles coming up. They're in the process of iReady Diagnostic 3 data right now. She wants to show me the great work that is happening in UFly instruction.
Good.
So,
Okay, that answers it.
yeah.
And then one last thing before you turn it over to Ezra, I'm assuming since she's here you will. At Vision Forward, and I wish I knew which one it was. We came up with our biggest surprise was number of students and staff loss. And then our biggest concern was lack of academic achievement. And there were some key questions that came out of that session. And I'm pretty sure this is something staff would have to address. But because it was really focused on academics, these are questions that I would like to know, and maybe it would help our committee.
Sure.
So I'll just submit this.
Okay,
I'll give it to you.
okay, thank you. Leave that if you want to move to, sorry.
Well, where are we?
How are you?
Good, thank
Are you
you.
okay?
Yeah, it's a full moon kind of
Oh
morning.
my goodness.
So have we talked about alternative school and student academics?
Yes, but if you would like us to, we'll start wherever you want to start.
Well, we can just maybe give like a brief chopped down version of what you talked about.
So can you tell us if you're wanting to know currently, or if you're wanting to know about the transformation for next year?
So I would like to know currently.
Okay.
So I know we already have kids who attend Webster
Mhm.
and who have been transitioned to that kind of scenario of alternative school. So has there been progress in their academics, or is it just steady? Has there been lack of progress? What is kind of like the overall of what the students are doing?
I'd say a combination. Sarah, do you want to speak on
I
this?
can. I mean, so the Graduate Academy, they're working towards the Missouri Options track. And so they are working on the big three, and then they're preparing them for the HiSET test. And so there's 5 subset tests within the HiSET test. And so we have some students that have already graduated through that process, but we also have some that And I can pull up, I don't, from Leah,
Yeah,
you have it pulled up. We can share that data with you, but, like, some kids maybe have passed 2 tests, some have passed 3, but they're working and they have some scheduled out, so. There was a little bit of a delay, probably in the progress, and it was about, they shifted companies, and there wasn't availability to take the test. Does that make sense? And so they had to delay when they could take the test. So there's specific dates that actually they do it out at Hilliard. That's their testing site right now. And so as far as the progress, it's not probably in some cases, some are progressing at a quicker rate than others, but that's anywhere in a classroom as well.
So you don't have like a set percentage of, 30% of our students have.
I can get probably the numbers and percentage of where they are and the number that have taken the test.
Okay.
I'm sending that to you right now, actually, just, it's from 2/16.
Yeah.
So it's fairly up to date. It is a difference because kids come to Webster and they're behind in credits, and then you shift and they're really working on a whole different platform. They're working on Missouri Options. But I see what you're saying. So you're wanting to measure success by their completion of Missouri Options. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
And I didn't know that they didn't have the option to graduate with their class if they get moved to the alternative school.
Correct.
And I think the reason behind that is because they didn't want to promote alternative school. It's a privilege to be able to walk with your high school class. And so they didn't want kids at their junior year with 4 credits going to alternative school because they can just do Missouri Options and then still be able to walk with their high school group at that high school. Does that make sense?
I think so, a little bit. So when did that change? Because I know before Webster used to be a school where you can work your credits to graduate. When did that shift happen?
When they couldn't walk with their class, do you know what year that was? It's been since I've been in high school, so at least 2017. It's before
Long
that.
time.
It's been a long time since they weren't able to walk.
They have their own ceremony.
But when did they shift solely to Missouri Options, that track? I don't know that, because I
Before
was
my
in high
time.
school. We are going to, though, we have spoken, talked about, when the Missouri Options program is back in the building, to have an opportunity they'll be part of the class, the cohort walking.
Right. And is
So,
that the
for
plan
next
for the new alternative center? Which is going to be the same. It's going to be at Webster still, but the program is going to be revitalized in some way, correct?
Missouri
Yes.
Options is going to be at each of the high school sites.
Okay.
Because those students aren't necessarily, there's some, but that's everywhere, they're not necessarily, they're really an academic deficient in credits. They're not at Webster because of behaviors. Now, they might have early on and maybe created some of that gap, but that's not why they're there. So they're gonna be back on site at the host schools, like at their home schools.
Okay.
And so.
The ones who are credit deficient.
Correct.
Yeah, through Missouri Options, yeah. The
Oh, yeah,
alternative-
that's kind of what I wanted to see.
Alternative
Okay.
will be credit, they'll be working towards credit next year. So if I'm sent to Webster, I'm in high school, I'm still working for credits. to
And they're
graduate.
still able to walk with their class.
We will, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not set in
Yeah.
stone yet, but
We, hopefully, if they're ready, they'll come back, they'll be returned back to the building, transition back.
yeah.
That would be our goal, yeah.
Okay, and then I guess I had one concern with the homework, obviously, was, when did that stop taking place? When did teachers stop giving out homework to the students?
There's nothing in writing, in policy or in our handbook, that says anything about homework, other than if a student misses a day of school, they have to have 1 extra day to complete homework. They're allowed 1 extra day. But lots of our teachers do give homework. There may be some that do not, if they have a group of students that they feel like wouldn't be successful in doing that work at home, and so they may do some of that in the classroom. But I would say at least half of our teachers do hand out homework on a regular basis.
So we don't have kind of like a correlation around the district that says everybody gets homework? Because I've talked to plenty of high school students, middle school students, elementary school, my kids don't get homework. And I know before COVID, it was consistent.
It is a teacher-based decision.
And sometimes it's because maybe they weren't getting it back either, so
Right.
there could be that. Or some students have it, like we talked about earlier, because maybe they didn't complete the assignment in class, so they're taking home some, but other students finished it, so it's not necessarily a separate assignment for homework, but it might be an extension to try to finish the work
Okay.
that they had.
And that is a conversation I had with the teacher there, when I brought this issue up to her. She was like, well, if they don't bring it back, we have to give them a back grade. So essentially, they would fail more so. But also, I know surrounding schools, private schools, they send their kids with loads of homework. You know, and when we compare the test scores, I mean, obviously, some are higher than ours. So my thing is, I remember a day when my son would come and he would have a bunch of homework to do, and I would help him. So I didn't know if there was like just something that kind of changed after COVID that was like, well, we're not going to do this. We're not going to mandatory say that everybody has to do this in the district. I just didn't know it was a teacher decision.
It is
to
a
do
teacher.
that.
Yeah, actually, I had a complaint from a parent just 2 weeks ago that their teacher was giving out homework every day. And it was way too much. It was all they were doing on the weekends, and they had homework over Christmas break. And so it's a teacher decision,
Okay.
for sure.
So like at Central, we can, like 3 teachers can give out homework and then the rest not give out homework.
You may, honestly, in a FACS class where they're cooking, they may not have a whole lot of homework because most
Right,
of the
well, it's-
instruction is hands-on. And so, and I would say the same thing with PE or ROTC. And so, but then you may have math regularly gives out homework, as does ELA. And Bethany had mentioned earlier at the elementary level, there's an encouragement for parents to read at home with their kids. And sometimes that they don't give out as much homework.
Or to do like Lexia or iReady. It's instruction that kids can do on their own and independently. You know, the purpose of homework is so that kids can gain skills. So if they're not independent or they don't complete it or they don't have someone there to support them in their home, then we've really just created almost a barrier. And so our goal is to teach kids, and so we try to provide everything we can and then layer supports through iReady, Lexia, reading to your child. Those are things that you can do at home that are going to help increase your child's achievement as well. Also, if you ever want homework, like if you just reach out to your child's teacher, they're probably more than happy to give you extra things you can work on at home, so that we can, I mean, we want to meet the parents' needs as well.
Okay. I guess I was just trying to figure out if there was a point where in the district everybody gave out homework. And also, I do know that the option to do the iReady and Lexia and all of that is available at home, but my thing is, when we talk about some households that don't have those devices, that don't have something to be able to access those after-school sessions, then we're not really engaging the kids. We're not keeping them engaged. So they go home, and especially on their break, and I'm not saying give homework to kids on their break, but something after school that keeps them engaged wouldn't be a bad thing. I mean, I know I had homework when I was
They don't
a kid.
always do it. I'm going to be really honest, a good majority of our students do not complete homework, so it really created almost an obstacle for teachers. So teachers are now having to find time within the day to complete the homework that they sent home in order to give them a grade, because they don't do them. There are some that do a great job and will do all of the homework that we would send home, but a good majority of our students do not.
Well, I think it'd be interesting to look at the data of the teachers who are giving homework and how many students are returning their homework, their assignments.
And I would guess that the ones who aren't giving it stopped giving it because it wasn't coming back from the kids. I've heard that just because I'm not that far removed from the building, that some of the teachers didn't give homework, especially in social studies, just because it didn't come back. Now math, I think they pretty regularly give out homework.
I think you have to define what homework is.
Right.
Because you can give homework, like, Dealo, I want you to do these 15 problems tonight, or please complete the learning activity that you didn't get finished. Those are two different things.
Or you should be reading 20 minutes tonight, guys. 20
Yeah.
minutes independent
So-
reading.
We even had,
Just-
and it, I mean, one of the reasons why sometimes my teachers didn't send home homework also, was the parents were completing the homework. Which also lends a different challenge, because if the student couldn't independently do the work in the classroom, but yet magically, when it went home, everything was done 100%, which it's wonderful to help a student. However, we need to make sure the student knows how to do the information. And so, I mean, that happened more times than I thought it ever would, to be honest. So either it didn't come back at all, or sometimes it didn't match what was going on. And then, so I do know I had teachers.
And I would say we had probably more complaints from parents about having homework than as to those that wanted homework. Because our kids are in so many night activities now, like sports and whatnot. They were like, we don't have time to do homework at home with our kids. So as a building principal, I got just as many complaints. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
obviously, it's a con and it's not
Yeah.
anybody's favorite subject, but I just think anything to keep the kids engaged outside of school
I agree.
would be a good
Yeah.
thing. But
And spelling used to be a big one, where kids would come
Right.
home with the
And that's-
spelling list.
that's another thing
And
that I struggle
so
with.
that's
Yeah.
kind of gone, and so, I
and what
think
about
that's
that?
made a big
When did
difference.
that become?
So
something
spelling is a function of phonics
yes.
and phonemic awareness, and so it's tied into that part of our curriculum. So, okay, and I always kind of fall back onto the work of Hattie and the work of research. So Hattie's work centered around homework says that it is actually ineffective at a primary level and at a high school level, no more than 15 minutes is proven to increase student achievement. Your impact is going to be lower than, say, high quality instruction, leading with standards. Like those are the things that we're putting what we want to see are things that are going to give us higher growth. And homework, it doesn't. At the primary level, it doesn't have an impact. And so then when you look also at spelling has that same, there is no impact on spelling. What happens is the people who work with their kids will take the list home and they will memorize the list, and the kids will take that spelling test on Friday and they will get 100%. And then when you turn around and have them write those words in their writing, they still don't know how to spell them. They've just memorized them in isolation in that one setting. So what we've done is we have wrapped spelling into our reading and our phonics and into our writing and our written expression, because when it's usable and it's functional, that's when kids will turn it into long-term memory and they will use it over and over and over again. So that's where we assess spelling now, is in our written expression, not in this isolated one-off test. So it didn't go anywhere, we just moved it into a functional.
When was that moved?
It was moved when we rewrote the curriculum this last year.
This last year?
Yeah, because the state doesn't have spelling standards. They have phonics and written expression standards, and we always lead with the state standard.
Right.
You may have seen a change just because of some changes in practices
Yeah.
like that.
Yes.
Well, that's the thing, that's why I'm like,
Handwriting.
there's well, obviously
That's
the
a whole
homework
other-
thing didn't
Yes.
change because it's
Yes.
teacher-based.
Yes.
But the spelling test and everything, obviously those things are kind of moved around, but with our reading scores so low, it kind of brings up the question of what are we doing, what have we done before maybe to not cause this, but stop focusing so much on this, or what can we do in the future to help the test scores? Because if for some reason sending the phonics, or not the phonics, but the sight word list at home was beneficial in a way, it probably something that we can bring back. But
Are they
there's-
not sending sight word lists home? 'Cause they
No.
should. Sight words are still part of, like, we are still teaching sight words. It's still
Right.
part of that is still something that should be
What
done.
I think is the reading test. So the ones that you practice and then you take that test on Friday.
The spelling test?
Right.
Okay, so that is proven to not be effective in increasing reading instruction.
Okay.
And so that's why we have kind of taken a step back and we have pushed that more into written expression, and we're focusing more on phonics and phonemic awareness and teaching it through that venue, because that's through our work with professional development, through our work with rewriting the curriculum, that's where we found to increase achievement. And that's what our goal is to
Okay, so
adjust our instruction.
it's something that is quote unquote proven? Or are we still kind of seeing the effects of that?
I don't.
So,
Can you reword that
okay,
question?
because you said that you guys changed the spelling test and kind of reworked it into something, into your reading or whatever. So is that something, have we shown kind of any, I know scientifically it's like this is what's working, but is it working for our district? Have we seen the improvement of that?
We've only done it this year,
This
so I
year,
don't know
okay.
that we could,
So Ms. Garcia, yeah, before you came in, we talked about, we meet K-12 in a literacy coalition with teachers. And right now, we're examining the implementation of year one of our curriculum and measuring its impact. Are we seeing gaps in data? Do we have a guaranteed and viable curriculum? The shift has really been about developing vocabulary and application into writing. And so what you'll see is, and you know, when you go into classrooms, there are some teachers that still use repetition as a form of an instructional practice to cement words down for kids. So like the other day I was working in a classroom and a student was writing, and then the teacher had to do an explicit conference one-on-one with the child, and so they had used a word wrong incorrectly. It was misspelled, basically.
Yeah.
And so they talked about the context of that word. It started with an RE prefix. And so we talked about, I heard the teacher talk about the RE, which means, you know, like, okay, so like when you say rework something, what does that mean, you know? And the teacher did a nice job of that. And then the child then, through repetition she asked him to compose another sentence using that word. And the child was successful in that experience, and she asked him to go meet with a peer to examine that process. At that point, it became very transformational for that child, because then the child really learned how to use that word in context, and then also learned how to spell it. So again, it's continuous relook at our curriculum to ensure that we're not impacting the data by this.
Okay, thank you. And that was a one-on-one setting?
It was in the classroom. But there are, I mean, like, I taught writing for 20 years, and so there were common words that some students misspelled, you know, and I would draw it out. If I saw it, like, as a whole class issue, then I knew I had a problem. But, so I drew it out in my mini lesson and say, hey, we need to talk about how to use our resources to effectively spell words correctly. They have red squiggly lines, and so teaching them how to use the tools and resources, which is a standard in our state curriculum. And so we developed vocabulary in that aspect. Sometimes we looked at, again, how to tear a word apart, looking at prefixes, suffixes, root words, and things like that. But if it was a child one-on-one, then I would address that child one-on-one in the conference. So I met with my writers pretty frequently in their work in writing instruction. So.
No, I think that does seem like a good breakdown of, you know, teaching that to the child. It's just, my concern is how many teachers have actually the time to do that with the students. If they have about 10 or 15 who are struggling with the same issue, they could face that classroom.
Right, it could be a small group, and that's why we lead an independent practice. Like when we talk about the instructional model, you pull them into a small group if you're seeing a common theme with a group of students. Again, but if it's one-on-one, it's a conference with the child. And again, I taught 8th grade, so I mean, and Bethany's, what she's done is you go in and you'll see anchor charts of sight words in our classrooms, and they have tools and resources to support that work. So, and then they'll have like a little laminated sheet that had some sight words while they were writing as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Well, those are.
No, I was just thinking, it's great that you have mentor teaching and group teaching,
Yeah.
where you can get together and say, this isn't working for me, how are you doing it?
Right.
And this student is having trouble here, how can I address that or my classes? So I appreciate how you are trying to work that in for new teachers even who haven't been in the classroom before, to learn ways to engage the students and bring about good learning from them.
And you know, that's the power of an instructional coach right now, because we can't be everywhere, right?
Well,
and so that's why we lead up learning for our instructional coaches, because really they're in the trenches in these classrooms, working with teachers one-on-one and examining practices to accelerate student learning to move our district forward in academic achievement.
Yeah, so when you said you are developing a local trainer, I just thought, wow,
Yeah,
what a
and
great
in-house.
thing.
Yes, yeah,
It's
yeah.
very good,
So, thank you.
good.
Okay. I think we're good. Anybody have any more questions? All right, I think we're done. Thank you guys for your time and for your answers.
Well,